What to make of this and the likelihood President Donald Trump did know about this allegation?
Well, Tom, if true, these allegations would be a major escalation between the US and Russia. How ironic that the Russians, having been the enemy of the Taliban, are now working with them potentially to try and take American lives. But the real significance of this issue is that it's a complete red rag to House Republicans and to Senate Republicans. The idea that a major rival could be targeting, putting a price on the heads of US troops fighting in Afghanistan, and that the Commander-in-Chief might not be concerned about that, might not be pushing back against that, that is a major issue for them. So the question now becomes, what aspects of this intelligence were presented to the White House, who knew it when, and what decisions were taken? We know that at one stage in March, there was an interagency meeting of the National Security Council, the peak national security body that works directly to the president. Whether it went into his presidential daily brief or whether he was told about it, that will now become the subject of these Congress deliberations that are happening right now.
Presumably questions too for the Morrison government. What of the intel and any ongoing risk to Australian troops?
That's a good question as well. I mean, it's not unusual that you see in these war zones a range of different intelligence agencies operating. You sometimes see countries that aren't involved in these conflicts paying local groups to try out tactics or to try out new weaponry. We've seen that in Iraq and we've seen that in Afghanistan. The question is, why did the GRU decide that they want to put a price on the heads of American troops, whether it was for intelligence reasons, whether it was simply to strike at Americans and cause problems for them as well? But this all goes to the question of how tough the president is in standing up for American interests. And if the Democrats are able to seize on criticisms of the president that he traded away American military lives for the sake of cozying up to Putin, that will be very damaging for him politically.
Announcement coming today around cyber warfare. Australia increasing what appears to be the defence capability around this, hiring another 500 people. What do you make of this and what it does to our capability? I mean, is this about just making ourselves a difficult target rather than actually being able to genuinely counter, the armies of cyber soldiers, if you like, from not just China, North Korea, Russia as well?
Well, there's two aspects to this announcement. And to put the announcement in context, the government is signalling another $1.5 billion a year for both cybersecurity and information warfare. And to put that in context, ASD's headline budget last year was $900 million. So this is a significant increase. This is a recognition of both the increased threat, the range, persistence and severity of cyber attacks we're seeing on Australia, constant cyber attacks on our institutions, our military and our intelligence agencies. But also the second part of this announcement is really important as well, and that's that some of this money is going to what's called information warfare, or as some people call it, political warfare. This is something that the Defence Force is becoming much more alert to. The Chief of Defence Force, Angus Campbell, did a very significant speech about a year ago talking about the rise of political warfare, people trying to use messaging through social media, through normal media, through influence operations to undermine Australia's democracy and independence. And so Defence is really very, very quickly getting up to speed on all of that and building capabilities to fight against it and to do a little bit of its own information warfare if necessary as well.
And what does that mean in terms of a practical example? I mean, we often cite the last US election and the fake news deliberately spread by Russian operatives. Is it something similar, someone trying to influence an Australian election? Is it more to do with our region instead?
It's all of the above, and it could be as simple as an adversary's intelligence operative starting a rumour in a capital in a Pacific neighbour or ally of Australia's. It could go through to armies of bots putting up political messaging on Facebook or other social media platforms to try and influence Australian voters and undermine our elections. But we're in a world which is awash in information. The sheer volume of that information and the velocity of it, the speed at which it moves around, means that it can be very hard to objectively work out truth and credibility. And where we've normally left that to the media, that's becoming an increasingly tough task as media organisations are under attack with their business models. So the government is really having to firstly be aware of the threat that people might want to use information against us, and secondly, be able to debunk it or to fight back. And it's a very complicated world. It's not something that we've done in recent times, but the Defence Force is getting up to speed and training people to do it.
Yeah, and the complications set to increase with the sort of fake artificial intelligence elements too, which is a scary prospect. I just wanted to talk to you finally about the claims from China of catching Australians in the act, spying in China. I mean, presumably we try to get some intelligence out of that country, but it's a bit of a curious claim that was put forward in the Global Times, including someone caught red-handed because they had a compass, among other things, in their knapsack as they were strolling around.
Look, when you look at that article by the Global Times, it looks like they've got a spy kit from the 1920s, a map, a compass, a sort of, everything but the magnifying glass, I think one person said on Twitter. It's a bit of a curious article. It's not a coincidence. I think the messaging behind it is, hey, we're not just going to take these allegations from Australia that we're engaged in intelligence operations. We believe Australia is too. There have been examples of Western intelligence agencies operating in China quite notoriously in recent years. The CIA, it was alleged, had a number of people they were working with executed in Beijing and captured, and their network compromised. So it's not out of the question that Western intelligence agencies operate in Beijing. I think the significance of this is going in the Global Times, a state-run organisation, so soon after Australia makes one of its first public investigations into potential breaches of the interference laws. I think that's the timing that's driving this announcement.
Yeah, I remember reading that article and thinking of where in the world is Carmen Sandiego. Maybe I'm showing my age. James Brown, thanks for your time.